graphics as well. So if I come in here, I'm just going to go select and see what I got here. Doesn't look like I did that yet, so maybe I want to do that. Oh, I did. Okay, there they are. It was a little bit more difficult to see when I had isometric there. But if I click on one of these, what I'm actually going to get is like her name boundary for that particular mesh. And I have item types on these elements. So if I go down to the item type, I'm going to run a quick report on the pavement mesh, right? So here I have the item type where I have the pay item, and I've got the density, the area, the unit that I want to pay for it in. And now I'm going to go over here to my reports. And I'm going to run this pavement by name boundary report. Now what I've done here is I'm just going to have my sheet number on here. I've got my item number, the pay item information, and I've also included my number of areas. So here I'm just going to go and run a preview of the report just so you can get an idea of how this is going to generate. And this is going to reach into reference files as well. So right now I'm just going to see, there's sheet 1, and then I can get my design area, the square yards, and how many areas that actually is made up of, and then that's just going to be per sheet. So depending on how you actually need to report on this information, you've got more options than what's just in there. Item types is always a route that you might take if you need it segmented out in different ways. I'm going to go ahead and get another file open. So while I'm talking about meshes, we can already have that other file open for us. Let's see, I'm getting this one here. All right, so we're creating these manual meshes. We're going to be using the Create Closed Mesh tool. So that's going to be on the Model Detailing tab under 3D Tools. And we can create a closed mesh there. We have 3 different methods we can use. We can do an element to an element. You can do an element to a depth, which is how we did that. You could do like topsoil stripping. And then we have element to a depth using a name boundary. Now, with any of these methods, you can use a fence to control, how the mesh is going to be bounded, or what the X and Y position of the boundary is going to look like. And then the closed mesh that we place is going to have a feature definition, which in turn is going to have a volume option. So here we're going to be just creating some meshes. I'm going to do this for existing pavement and also this area that we'll just refer to as muck that's going to be unsuitable. We're going to take it out and replace it with something else. So the first thing we want to do though is we're going to have a terrain model, for the bottom surface and the top surface, whatever those bounding elements are going to be. So here I'm using my tool, and I'm going to do an element to a depth in this case, and I'm going to select the terrain model that I created for that muck material, and then I'm going to enter whatever that depth is, and it will create the mesh for me. If you were doing existing pavement, you can do the same thing. A lot of times you might use this for like milling, where you could take your existing ground would be your top bounding surface, and then you could either hit it from like where your pavement's going to be, your corrected cross slope, or you could also do patching and leveling with this. It's a great way to supplement anything that you can't do with your templates. But now that we have that unsuitable material, we're going to look at our end areas. So I have these in here. I am going to create those cut and fill meshes first. But this time, as it goes through, I can additionally go in and compute unsuitable now, because I have that unsuitable material in there that's already been predefined in the feature definition. now we're going to go and process that for our named boundary and get our quantities. Now I don't want to focus too much on this because it's not really the report that I want to use. I think what we can do a much better job with is when we do the named boundary report. So I want to show you is how you can create your named boundary report and cut up your model in different ways and quickly go in and create those named boundaries. Now before I do that, we'll look at this option. This is a pretty nice example of where we're going to model a rock surface, and then we're going to do the volumes for this one. So I have my existing ground, I have a terrain model for my rock that I'm going to have in here. So we'll go ahead and take a look at that. So there I'm doing a cut section, and I've got my rock surface down here, and then I've got my existing ground up on top. Right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to create some meshes for these elements so that we can separate the type of fill that we're going to have. So we're going to have just regular fill, and then we're also going to have maybe some your unclassified excavation, maybe some rock excavation, so you can separate that out to different subtypes. So first we're going to create the mesh. We're going to do an element to a depth, and we're going to choose rock. So for the depth, we're going to choose 75 feet, and then it's going to go in and generate that mesh for us. So there we'll see that there, where it's just going from the element to the depth, so that's going from the terrain model or whatever depth it is that you got from the boring logs. Now if I take a look at that feature definition, I'm going to look at the properties for it and see what volume options that we have. So we got that set to substrata, and then for the replaced feature we have it set to a TC dirt, and then we also can choose whether or not we want to include that in our mass ordinate. Right, one more mesh here. We're going to do the existing pavement. So there's different ways that you can come up with doing this one. I'd probably start with your survey file, maybe grab your edges of pavement, and then create a terrain model just for your existing pavement. And then from that terrain model, we can create a mesh. From the boundary of it, we can create a mesh. So here we're going to do a fence first, and I'm just going to use that shape for my existing pavement as my fence. We could also apply a surface template in this case, and that would also give us a similar result. But we're going to look at the closed mesh tool. So for here, we're going to do the element to a depth using an element boundary, and we're going to toggle on using the fence. And then choose our feature definition, of course. So that's going to be our existing pavement. And then we're going to choose whatever that depth is going to be. So we would see whatever that existing pavement depth is, and then create that mesh. Now on this one, we have just an alternate method. So this is going to be more of a varying existing pavement. So if you have different depths. So here I'm going to choose and create a terrain model first. I'm creating a clip terrain model. So I'm taking my existing terrain and I'm just going to clip it down to what I want to create this mesh from. So I'm using that orange shape there. So I'm going to clip the terrain, or select the terrain I want to clip. I'm going to go and select the orange shape, and then that's going to create a new terrain for me in here. Now let's skip ahead, and we're going to go in and take a look at creating the meshes next. It looks like they're just going a little bit further, and they're going to go in and clip out the insides here. All right, now getting into a new file, we don't want to do all this in the same file. We're going to have that terrain model that we created that's going to represent our existing pavement, and then we're going to use our closed mesh tool again and use an element to a depth, and then we'll go in and select our top surface. which is going to be our terrain model that we clipped for the existing pavement. And we'll go ahead and select that. All right, now when I get back in here, so when you're creating your named boundaries, what you can do is you can slice and dice it however you need to. I'm going to use this ramp as an example. So maybe the requirement here is I wanted to know my quantities every 100 feet. But you're going to end up with some oddball like shapes for your named boundaries because we don't want to overlap these because everything that is inside of that named boundary is what we're going to be reporting on. So I don't want to report on part of my ramp over here and then also part of my ramp on this one as well. So I'm going to show you just kind of a workflow I've come up with to make this a little bit easier. And so we're going to start, and I'm going to just place my named boundaries. So I'm going to place them right here along the ramp. I'm going to do them every 100 feet. So we're just going to do a regular plan here, and I'll put it into see where my alignment is. So we'll start it there. Let's do every 100 feet. There we go. And I'm also going to change my offsets a little bit. So looks like this alignment actually starts in the right here. So those offsets are way larger than what I really need. So I'm going to first start there. Let's see what 100 looks like. That looks a little better. And then as I come in here, notice I'm going to have some overlap as I come in here. So I'm going to go ahead and place these first. I'm not going to create any drawings. And I'm going to go ahead and give this a name. Just call this ramp B. And then we'll go ahead and place those. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create some shapes for these other ones. So what I'll do is I'm going to use a microstation tool for this. I'm going to go over to just create a shape. And I'm going to do flood, and we'll come over here. Now I need to turn off everything but my shapes. So I'm going to go into my references and turn off all of these. And then now that I have those in there, it'll be easy for me to go in and create those shapes. So I'm just going to do the ones that kind of have an odd shape there. Leave that one alone. And then from there, I'm actually going to delete these named boundaries out. And I'm going to use another tool to create those named boundaries. So now I'm going to go in here. And this is what I do. Have you ever been in a situation where you needed to create a plan sheet and you needed to rotate it? But then when you rotated it, everything was in the wrong spot. So this is what I use when I'm in those situations. So I first create the name boundary to get the size, just using the regular tool, just to get the size that I would need to have that was going to fit on my plan sheet. And then use that shape. So I just create an element from that shape. And then from that element, then I follow back up and I use the name boundary from plan instead. Now before I create these, I'm going to go and delete the other ones. So that's going to start at plan 13 to 19. So I'm going to get rid of those. Let's say 13. Now in my name boundary, I'm going to go in and create these. Now I think I can create them from a selection set, so I'm going to try that first. And now I also want to add these to the same group, so I'm going to add those back into ramp B. And I might have to pick them. Let's see here. Looks like I got them now. Okay. All right, so now I have those odd shaped name boundaries, and they're all part of the same group. So anytime I have to make some odd shapes, I kind of use and leverage that, just create microstation shape, and that helps me. But the first thing you want to do is create your just regular name boundary first, just so you can see the alignment of those. But if you wanted to, you could rotate these shapes any way you want to, and before you go in and you create your drawing model, if you're going to be using sheets, then it would look correctly. Now, what we can do with these also is we can take them and we can reference them into another file, so you don't have to have your name boundaries in the file that you want to create your reports in. So you could go ahead and you could lay out your name boundaries for your entire project, and then you could go in and bring those up. And then when you're laying this, I think I have a few examples in here. Let's see what we got going on here. No, I thought I had the northbound and southbound there, but I didn't. So that about wraps that up. Does anybody have any questions or would like to see anything in particular? I can open up a file and we can just play around a little bit of time that we have left. All right, if there's no questions. Oh, go ahead.
I think that I noticed if I'm creating those name boundaries for quantities and I go across a station equation, that it maintains a strict, like 100-foot length, and it doesn't shift at the station equation to start. Like, so what would end up is in my report, I would go, station 100, 200, 200, 300, and then across the station equation, it would suddenly go from 300 to 400 plus 23.21 or something. And a lot of times in the table, we want to keep even stations all the way.
You might use you might just create another alignment on top of that one to put your name boundaries on. It doesn't have the station equation. Other than that, I'm not really sure how you can remove that.
Yeah.
I think you just have to renew it.
I'm trying to visualize that.
I put in, I created
Picturing it in my mind.
I created separate non-standard sections right at the station equation, so that on the other side of it, my table would have even stations again.
I think
Okay.
that's what I envisioned.